Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program where I'll be sharing with you the 5 precepts. This is a householder's guide to daily practice where you're going to learn 5 impactful decisions that you can make either wisely or unwisely and produce either wholesome results or unwholesome results. If you've heard that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, this isn't actually the teachings of the Buddha. This is very rudimentary translations. It sounds like black and white or rules and commandments. What I'm going to be doing is after our meditation, I'm going to be sharing with you the original words of the Buddha on the 5 precepts, and I'm going to show you how to relate these important teachings to day-to-day decisions that you make in your day-to-day life. So I'd like to welcome all of you and at the same time invite you to join for a meditation. I'm going to start with some chanting to ease into the meditation. Then I'm going to share some guidance during the meditation. There's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're all meditating together. Then we're going to come out of that with some more chanting. And then that's where I'll start today's class. So if you'd like to join for meditation, feel free to pull up a meditation cushion or anything else that you'd like to use in order to get comfortable for meditation. Samma sambuddho bhagava Bhutang bhagavanang abhivateyami Sawakato bhagavata tammo Dhammang namasami Supatipanno bhagavato Savaka sangho Sanghang namami Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa Iti piso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho Vicacaranang sammuno Sakato rokavitu Anutero purisa Dhamma sati satatawa Manusang Bhoto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here, you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahaṃ Samma Sambuddho Bhagavā Bhutaṃ Bhagavaṃ Abhivādeyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti Piso Bhagavā Arahaṃ Samma Sambuddho Vichācāranaṃ sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatava Manusranam Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see you all in the class today. Today, we're going to be discussing the 5 precepts, helping you guys to understand this important teaching. Because if you remember back to some of the other teachings I've been sharing in this group learning program, this is a teaching that's going to plug into those teachings. So if you can remember back to the Eightfold Path and the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires, I just touched on that particular topic way back at the beginning. But recently we've been learning about the Eightfold Path, the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And as part of that Eightfold Path, I shared with you some moral conduct of right speech and right action. And with this moral conduct, I mentioned to you that in the Eightfold Path, the Buddha talks just very generally and kind of very broadly. The right speech, he speaks pretty detailed, but in terms of right action, he speaks a bit broadly. And the reason why is because it's the 5 precepts that's going to really illuminate that for you. So the Eightfold Path is the path to enlightenment. If you are interested in getting to this peaceful and joyful mental state where your mind doesn't experience any discontent feelings any longer, you're going to need to know this Eightfold Path inside and out, backwards and forwards. Well, as part of that Eightfold Path, you're learning wholesome moral conduct that's going to produce wholesome results for you. And when you're making decisions wisely around your moral conduct, you're going to see that wholesome results come about. You're going to experience wholesome Kamma. But when you make unwise decisions, you're going to experience unwholesome results or unwholesome Kamma. So it's the 5 precepts. It's giving you a baseline foundation of what is wise and unwise regarding your moral conduct. Now, sometimes when people are learning this, they think of it as rules or commandments or something like that. But that's not what the Buddha is actually teaching you. He's not giving you any kind of rules or commandments. He's helping you to be able to see this natural law of Kamma, of cause and effect, action and result. Now, some people refer to this as karma. That's the Sanskrit version of this word. Well, the original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language, so people who study his teachings will tend to use this word Kamma. If this translated to just one English word, I would just use that English word. But unfortunately, it doesn't. So I still need to use this word Kamma. This is a natural law that is affecting you, whether you're aware of it or not. That whenever you make decisions wisely or unwisely, you're going to experience either wholesome Kamma or wholesome results, or unwholesome Kamma or unwholesome results. This natural law isn't about punishments and rewards or who's to blame or who's at fault. There's no being who's overseeing this natural law that's dishing out punishments and rewards. It's none of that kind of stuff. It's nothing mystical or magical or superstitious or auspicious. It's literally the results of your decisions. That it's your life, it's your decisions, and it's your results. When we talk about awakening to enlightenment, what this means is to cultivate wisdom of the natural laws. That in the unenlightened state, the mind lacks wisdom of these natural laws, and because of that, you'll go out into the world making unwise decisions, and you'll experience unwholesome results. And when you're experiencing these unwholesome results coming back to you, typically what people do is they blame this on good luck or bad luck, destiny or fate. They will say God or some entity called the universe is controlling what they experience, or they'll blame it on other people. But it's actually not true, that none of those things are actually occurring. It's your own decisions that are leading to any particular result that you experience. And when you understand this, it's very empowering, because if there's anything that you don't particularly care for that's going on in your life, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you'll experience different results. But if you subscribe to the thinking that what you experience on a daily basis is good luck or bad luck, destiny or fate, God or some entity called the universe, or if it's other people that are causing what you experience, then you're stuck and you're locked in. You're a robot, because you can't change any of those kinds of things. But when you come to see that it's your own decisions that are leading to any particular result that you experience, if there's anything that you don't particularly care for and you would rather not occur in your life, just cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you'll experience different results. So that's what you're doing on the path to enlightenment, is you're awakening or cultivating wisdom about this natural law of Kamma, so that you can see the wise decisions that lead to wholesome results in your life. Because one of the things that you'll experience as you get to enlightenment is all your relationships are harmonious, that you don't have any bitterness, harshness, and hostility in your mind any longer, and you're making wise decisions about how you interact with other people. Because when you put out unwise decision making, it's going to damage your relationships. So these 5 precepts are here to guide you in understanding wise decision making based in this natural law. Again, the Buddha is not giving you rules or commandments. He's helping you to be able to see this natural law very closely. And I'm going to use his original words to be able to help you see this. And then I'm going to relate it to day-to-day decisions that you make on a daily basis, so that you can see how you could potentially make wise or unwise decisions in any given situation. And then I'm going to invite you to ask questions as I go, because oftentimes students have questions. And if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can ask questions by putting that in the comment section. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like that way. Additionally, that the 5 precepts are helping you to be able to understand how to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance out of the mind. These are a high-level way to describe the pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind and what's actually hindering you from being able to experience the enlightened mental state. While we call it attaining enlightenment, one of the ways to think about it is that your mind is already enlightened, that the natural state of the mind is enlightened, but you have these pollutions that are in the way that are hindering you from being able to experience the qualities of the enlightened mind. And you've got to get those pollutions out of the way, uprooting them out of the mind. Well, these 5 precepts is what's helping you to be able to do that, among other teachings. So if you have the sun and there's clouds in front of the sun, if you peel those clouds away, the rays of the sun will slowly start shining through. And it's the same thing about the mind, is that the mind's natural state is enlightened, but it has these pollutions that are in the way. And when you get those out of the way, now the mind can experience more and more of the qualities of enlightenment. So I'm going to help you guys to see this and understand his teaching through the original words of the Buddha. Because if you've heard the Buddhists taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, this isn't actually true. He never taught that. It sounds like rules and commandments. It sounds like black and white, but there's a large gray area here that I'm going to help you to be able to see and navigate so that it can become more clear for you about what would be wise or unwise decision making in any given situation. So here's the first precept. The Buddha shares abandoning the taking of life, refraining from taking life, without stick or sword, diligent, compassionate, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. So whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha and you're looking to understand them, you need to investigate and examine his teachings. And if there's anything that you don't particularly understand, or you're not quite sure if your definition of it is the same as what's being described in the teachings, you need to investigate those teachings. So, for example, with this particular teaching, it's clear that the Buddha is teaching about living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. Well, it's unwise to just assume that you know what a living being is, because the Buddha is teaching you to live compassionately for all living beings. And what compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. And you need to know what is a living being and what isn't a living being here. So the Buddha gave guidance on how to determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being. He taught a teaching called the five aggregates. You might think about this as the five criteria or the five elements. This is what determines whether or not it is a living being or it isn't a living being. And this definition is held up for 2,500 years. So I'm going to introduce you to it here and then show you how to independently verify that it's true, because you know that you're a living being. And as I share with you guys, these five aggregates, you can verify it through your own existence to see that you have all five of these criteria. So for example, the five aggregates are that every living being is going to have physical form. You can see that you have physical form. You have a physical body. The second one is that a living being is going to have feelings, and you can see that you have feelings. A living being is going to have perceptions, which are your views and opinions about the world. And you know that you have views and opinions about the world. Then there's something called volitional formations. What this is choices and decisions, that you have free will, that you can make your own choices. And you can see that you have that. You're able to make your own choices about how to navigate the world. Then the fifth one is a consciousness or the mind. So you have all five of these aggregates: form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, and then a consciousness or the mind. And not only do you have these, but you can see that a squirrel, a rabbit, a spider, a bird, all of these types of beings also have the five aggregates. They are living beings. So the Buddha is teaching you to live compassionately for these living beings. But you're not interested in just stopping there when you're independently verifying a teaching like the five aggregates or any of the other teachings that the Buddha teaches. So we can compare it to beings that we know to be living beings, but you should also take it and compare it to something that you know is not a living being, like this electronic device that you're listening or watching this particular teaching in this class on. Ask yourself, does this electronic device have physical form? Well, the answer is yes, it has physical form. Does it have feelings? No, doesn't have any feelings. Does it have perceptions? Does it have views and opinions about the world? No, doesn't have those. Does it have volitional formations? Does it have free will to make its own decisions? No, it doesn't. It can't pick itself up and move itself around. And does it have a consciousness? No, it doesn't have a mind. So you can see that it doesn't have the five aggregates and it's not a living being. So you can use these five aggregates to determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being. As you're getting familiar with these five aggregates, this is going to bring you closer and closer to understanding what is a living being, so you can apply this precept of living compassionately for all living beings. But in the meantime, as you're getting familiar with that, you might decide to use a definition like this, that a living being is generally going to come from an egg, a sperm, and it's always going to have a consciousness or a mind. Not all living beings come from an egg and a sperm. All living beings will have a consciousness, but not all of them come from an egg and a sperm. But about 99.9% of them pretty much do come from an egg and a sperm. But that's why the Buddha didn't use this as a definition for how to determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being, because it's the five aggregates that is the natural law. So that's what you're going to need to learn. But in the meantime, you can use this to kind of help you lean in the direction of understanding what is a living being and what isn't a living being. But then more directly, you would like to learn and practice with the five aggregates. So you can see from the five aggregates, and also even talking about an egg and a sperm and a consciousness, that plants, that bacteria, viruses, things like this are not a living being. Now, we use language in the unenlightened state because of our lack of wisdom that oftentimes leads us in a direction that doesn't represent true reality. For example, someone might say, don't kill that plant, or I'm going to kill this bacteria, or I'm going to kill this virus in the body so that I'm not sick any longer. Well, you're not actually killing the plant or killing the bacteria or killing the virus, because these things aren't living beings. You can't actually kill them. So even though people think of them as being alive, you can't actually kill something that isn't a living being. So what we're really doing with that plant is we're harvesting the plant, or we're eliminating the bacteria from the body, or we're eliminating the virus from the body. And we can see through the five aggregates that we're not causing any harm here, and that we're not killing and taking life by doing these things. But we can also see it through the natural law of Kamma, because the natural law of Kamma is that if you're killing a living being and causing harm, harm is going to come back to you. So when we harvest a plant, we don't experience unwholesome Kamma. We experience wholesome Kamma. That now we have broccoli, or we have a apple or an orange or something like this that we can actually now use to sustain our life. Or when we eliminate a bacteria from the body, we're not experiencing unwholesome results. If that was a living being and we were killing a living being, we would experience unwholesome results. But when we eliminate a bacteria from the body, we're actually experiencing wholesome results, or wholesome Kamma, that the body becomes more healthy. So you can see through the five aggregates in the natural law of Kamma that these things aren't living beings. But oftentimes people are using language that doesn't accurately represent what it is that's true reality in the world. So in order to get to enlightenment, you need to cultivate wisdom about many things in the world, including vocabulary and how you're using vocabulary. And you might come to understand and start using language that's more accurate in terms of the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So now that we understand a bit about what this precept is, and that the Buddha is teaching us to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, and understanding compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others, and we understand what a living being is, now we can start looking at things that would potentially take the life of a living being, like euthanasia of a human or animal, termination of a pregnancy, suicide, assisted suicide, capital punishment, war, government-sponsored killings and murders. These are all intentional killings. But whether somebody chooses to do these things or not is a personal choice for that person. When I'm sharing with you teachings from the Buddha, I'm not here to convince you to do anything. I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing with your life. I'm here to help you see this natural law of Kamma more and more closely, and then you make whatever decision you would like to make for your life. But all of these are intentional killings. But I'm going to give you examples of where you could actually do these things, and it could be potentially wise, and you could do these things and it could be potentially unwise. And it's you that's going to make the decision of what you would like to do. But I'm going to help you to be able to see this, because it's not black and white. So I'm going to start with something like termination of a pregnancy. Now, some people think of this as a political discussion. This, in my opinion, isn't political. It's not politics. That this is a medical procedure that we have, and in some cases it can be helpful, and in some cases it could potentially be harmful. But whether somebody chooses to terminate a pregnancy or not, it's a choice for them to make. It's not up to me to decide for someone else what they should or shouldn't be doing with their body. In fact, if a student came to me and said, "David, should I terminate my pregnancy or not?" I wouldn't tell them yes or no. I would say, well, if you terminate your pregnancy, here's what you'll experience. And if you don't terminate your pregnancy, here's what you'll experience. And now this is a decision for that person to make. So it's never a situation where I would ever put myself in a position to make a decision for someone else. But I will help you to see the natural law of Kamma here so that you can decide for yourself what would be wise or unwise for you. So let's just pretend that I have a womb in this body, which obviously I don't. So if I had a womb in this body and a doctor came to me and said, hey, you have this individual growing inside your womb, there's a fetus there, and we can tell that it's never going to live a viable life outside of the womb. And if you continue to allow this to grow inside the body, it's threatening your life and you could die at any time. And we suggest that you terminate the pregnancy. Well, if that's the case, and I chose to terminate the pregnancy, this could be a wise decision potentially, because now eliminating that particular growth in that fetus, that being that's starting to grow inside the womb, that it's threatening my life. And now, if I'm going to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, the very first being that you need to have compassion for is yourself. If you don't live compassionately, having concern for your misfortunes, then you can't have compassion for other beings. So in this situation, an individual might choose to terminate the pregnancy, and this could potentially be a wise decision. This is kind of like a once in a lifetime situation that someone might experience that, maybe twice in a lifetime. They might experience something like that. But then there could be another situation. Let's just say I was regularly having sex and becoming pregnant frequently, and I was using termination of pregnancy in order to use it as birth control. And maybe now 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 different times I'm having this procedure in order to terminate the pregnancy. Well, in this situation, I'm now going to start experiencing unwholesome results here. That as you have this procedure multiple times like that, it starts to cause harm to your own physical body. Because of this harm that I'm causing, it's going to start causing harm to this body. And I'm going to find that it's harder and harder for me to maintain my health, because each time I'm having one of these procedures, it's straining the health of my own body. But again, whether someone chooses to do this or not, it's a choice for them to make. But you can see that it's not black and white here. Sometimes people like to think, you should never terminate a pregnancy, or you should always be able to terminate a pregnancy. It's really up to each individual to decide for themselves whether they would like to do that or not. And here's an example of where it could potentially be beneficial and wise. And here's an example where it could potentially be unbeneficial. But the ultimate decision is for each person to make for themselves. Then let's take something like, let's just actually take a real world thing that actually did happen to me at one time, which is I had termites in my house. My wife came to me and she said, David, we have termites. I was like, really? Are you serious? I was like, I've never even seen a termite. What does a termite look like? How do you even know that we have termites? Because I was living in the same house as her and I didn't know that we had termites. And she was like, come here, I'll show you. And she walked me over and she showed me where the termites were in the house. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess we need to take care of this. So what I did in order to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings is I started doing some research on how to eliminate termites without actually killing them. That's me living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And what I came back with is that there's no way to actually eliminate termites without actually killing them, at least right now. So my wife decided that she was going to call someone to come and take care of this, and they needed to kill these termites in order to eliminate them. And this was living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because the first beings that we needed compassion for is ourselves. We couldn't donate our house to these beings to be able to eat it, and then we were going to be out without a house. That's not possible for us. And this is one of the challenges of living in the animal world, is you don't have a high enough consciousness to think through your decisions of what would be wise or unwise. Because these termites, they were eating a house. They were causing harm to a living being. And now harm came back to them because they were causing harm to either our physical body, our material possessions, our reputation, right? They were causing harm to our material possessions. This is what I teach you about causing harm. And whenever harm is coming or whenever harm is produced, harm is going to come back to you. Whereas if human beings, if we ate wood and we needed a substance like that in order to be able to sustain our life, we'd probably go out into the forest where it wouldn't cause any harm to other beings, and we would eat that wood, and we would understand that that would be a wise decision. But these termites didn't understand that. They didn't have a high enough level of consciousness. So this harm that they were causing, harm then came back to them. Here's another example, say like war or something of this nature. A government could say to their citizens, hey, we would like you to go over there and kill those people. If you go over there and kill those people, we'll be fine with that. But if you come over here and you kill people on our land, we're going to arrest you for murder. So this is one of the problems with human laws and laws of society, is that they're imperfect, that they don't actually match to the natural law of Kamma, that you can't run and hide from the natural law of Kamma, that a government could tell you, hey, go kill those people over there and we're fine with that. But if you kill these people over here, we're going to arrest you and put you in jail for murder. Well, the natural law of Kamma doesn't function that way. The natural law of Kamma is going to affect you whether you're aware of this natural law or not, and it doesn't involve any human beings. So if I went off to war and I was fighting in a war, I'm very likely to get injured or killed myself. I can end up getting addicted to drugs and substances. Oftentimes that's what happens with soldiers. Or even when soldiers come back from war, they oftentimes have a hard time reintegrating back into society, having difficulty sustaining their life through employment or acquiring basic needs like housing and food and things like this. This is the unwholesome results or the unwholesome Kamma of having chosen to go off into war and kill. This isn't punishments or rewards. This is just the results of our decisions of what we experience. So there's multiple killings that an individual could choose to experience, and you need to be able to look at each one of these situations and see what would be wise or unwise in any given situation. And where a student needs help, they can always reach out to me, and I'm here to help them, but I won't make a decision for you. It's up to each student to make a decision for themselves. So sometimes students ask me questions about things like, I have here like a DNR. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with what this is. This is actually a legal document. It's called a do not resuscitate. That an individual who's alive, they can put together a document that informs their relatives that if you die, do not use medical technology to bring me back to life. Well, if you've put one of these in place, sometimes students ask me, am I practicing this precept? Am I living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings? And the answer is yes, because you haven't killed anybody. You haven't taken anybody's life. You're just saying that you're comfortable with death. Sometimes people ask me questions about defense or protection. Let's say they're sleeping in their house at 2 a.m. in the morning and someone breaks in through their window of their house and they come into their house. Well, what I teach people here is that it's important to understand if someone's breaking into your house at 2 a.m. in the morning, they're not bringing you chocolate and flowers. That's not what they're there for. They're there to potentially cause harm. And you would be wise, if you could, is to get out of the house. If they would like to steal something, if they'd like to break something, damage something, okay, up to them. You get away, get yourself safe, get to a neighbor's house, call the police. They have the equipment and the training to be able to handle something like this. But these teachings are not black and white. The Buddha is not giving you a decision tree that if this happens, do this. It's not plug and play, right? There's not just one decision for every single situation, because that would be permanence, and we live in an impermanent world. Instead, you need to see all the variables here, because even though I share with you that it's wise to get out of the house, in some situations, it might not be wise to leave out of the house. You might look outside and you see a gang of people in your yard, or you might look outside and the whole neighborhood's on fire. Right? Maybe if there's a wildfire and someone's breaking into your house, right? To loot your house or something like that. So you need to decide in each situation what will be wise or unwise. And that's why you're moving to this higher consciousness to think through the decisions that you're making to determine what would be wise or unwise. So let's just say you're backed up in the corner and this person has a knife or a gun or a baseball bat or something like this, and they're there to cause harm. Well, you would be unwise to just stand there and let them stab you with the knife, right? That's not living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because you're not living compassionately for this being. So if you need to cause harm to this individual in order to stop the harm that's coming to you, you're still practicing this precept. You would like to cause the least amount of harm as possible in order to get this harm to stop coming to you. And this is what's going to produce wholesome results for you in that situation. You can potentially avoid any kind of harm that's coming to you. And then sometimes people ask me about eating plant-based products and eating vegan. If you would like to actually do this, you're more than welcome to switch to a plant-based food supply, and you will see improved results in the way that your body functions in terms of the health of the body and things of this nature. But whether someone chooses to do this or not is a choice for them to make. Because when you're eating animal flesh, you've contributed to the death of a being. And when you're eating that animal flesh, there's drugs, hormones, and toxins in that animal flesh that are affecting the health of your body. There's plenty of ability for you to be able to independently verify this and see this. They've actually done studies where they've taken wild salmon out of clean running streams in places like the USA, and they've tested the animal flesh, and they found that there was 80 or 90 different substances in that flesh that weren't supposed to be there. Things like cocaine and antidepressants and things like this, because human beings have been flushing that kind of stuff down the toilet, and we've actually polluted the water table. So now the water, including the groundwater that animals are eating or drinking, this is all polluting the actual animal itself, whether it's a wild animal or a farmed animal. And farmed animals are getting injections with growth hormones and antibiotics and things like this. So when you're eating the animal flesh, you're eating those drugs and toxins as well, and it's affecting the health of the body and the health of the mind. So if you decide you'd like to move to a plant-based food supply, you're going to see improved health with the body and the mind. At one time, human beings were plant-based eaters, and you can see this through our teeth, that we, at one time when we first came into the world, we only ate plants. That's all we ever ate. And we have the teeth very similar to a cow and a horse and things like this. And that's why we don't have those really sharp, tearing, ripping teeth like a lion or a tiger or something like that, because we were never intended to eat meat. It's just something that we did out of necessity. And it wasn't enough meat for us. So eventually we got to the point where we're doing manufactured farming, and now there's millions and millions of animals that are being killed every day. So again, whether someone chooses to move to a plant-based food supply or not is up to them, but you will see improved results because of the natural law of Kamma with the health of your body. So let me know if you guys have questions here. You can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So just let me know if you guys have any questions you would like to ask here. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So I'm going to move to the next precept, which is number 2. The Buddha here says, abandoning the taking of what is not given, living purely, accepting what is given, awaiting what is given, without stealing. So here the Buddha is once again helping you to understand that taking something from somebody else is unwise, and it's going to lead to harmful results for you, because this is helping you to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance. This craving, this longing, yearning is the mind wanting something that it doesn't have. And now sometimes what people choose to do is they steal that, right? And this is having ill will towards that other being, because that other being worked really hard to acquire that particular resource. And if you take it from them, it's going to cause them harm. Like if you stole somebody's car, now they can't go to work. They can't take their kids to school. They can't go to the store and buy basic necessities to sustain their life. It's going to cause this person harm. And where this is coming from is the mind's lack of wisdom of these natural laws, that whenever you cause harm, harm is going to come back to you. So the Buddha teaches you to not steal. And then we can also understand through this precept that it would be unwise to assume that something can be taken or used. So for example, if I was going into a college class to turn in a paper and I haven't stapled my paper yet, and there's a stapler on the professor's desk, but the professor is out of the classroom, it would be unwise for me to assume that I can use this stapler. If I walked over to this professor's desk and just started using the stapler, if the professor walks in, they might be like, "Hey, what are you doing? That's my stapler. Why are you using my stapler?" They could get really angry and frustrated that I'm using their stapler without permission. And now that anger that they have in their mind, it's their own mind that's causing it, but they don't necessarily understand that. And now maybe I get a bad grade on my paper, or maybe they're so angry they actually fail me in the entire class, right? So this would be unwise to assume that something can be used or taken. But the teachings of the Buddha aren't black and white, right? It's not always do it this way and never do it that way. That would be like a decision tree, a plug and play. You need to move to this higher consciousness and understand how to apply these precepts in any given situation. Let's just say I was out in my neighborhood or in my village and I saw one of my fellow neighbors have been doing some yard work and they cut themselves and they're bleeding profusely out of their arm. And they could die at any moment that they're bleeding so much. Well, let's just say one of my other neighbors has a piece of fabric on their front porch, and I could use this fabric in order to put a tourniquet on their arm, and I could save their life. Well, I'm not going to go over to their house and ring their doorbell and sit there and wait for them to come downstairs after 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then ask for permission to use that fabric. That's not what I'm going to do in that situation. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab that fabric, wrap up the tourniquet, save this person's life, get them on an ambulance and headed to the hospital, right? And now because I know this precept and I know it's unwise to take something without asking, I'm going to go back to that neighbor's house. I'm going to now ring the doorbell and wait for them to come downstairs and explain to them that I apologize that I've taken their item and I would like to replace it. That if they could let me know where they purchased this so that I could go purchase another one and bring it to them, I would like to do that. Or either just give them the money to reimburse them for this product, right? So it's not always do it this way and never do it that way. You need to move to this higher consciousness and take things into consideration. Look at all the variables and decide what would be wise in any given situation. That goes for this next one too, where the Buddha says, accepting what is given. Like, let's just say, for example, that you're being offered a certain gift. The Buddha teaches you that it's wise to accept this gift because that person is practicing generosity. And when they're practicing generosity, it's helping to enhance the quality of their mind. And if you shut down their ability to practice generosity, now it's not helping to enhance the quality of their mind. And what you're going to find is over time, people are going to stop offering things to you. And then those people aren't going to actually be able to improve the quality of their mind by practicing generosity. This actually helps them to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. So that sweater that grandma gives you at some certain holiday, and you look at the sweater and you're like, I'll never wear that sweater ever. The Buddha is teaching you to accept it, right? That's helping grandma's mind to be able to practice generosity. But now what you do is, if you're not interested in wearing that sweater, is you can practice generosity by giving it to somebody else. Some people think, oh, this is wrong. It's going to hurt grandma's feelings. Well, if grandma has hurt feelings that you've given away the sweater, that was because grandma didn't practice pure generosity. She had expectations. She had certain cravings and wants and desires, and she didn't just give it to you. She had certain strings attached to it, and she's causing that anger herself. So you're not causing any harm by practicing generosity to give the sweater to somebody else. And now you've practiced generosity, and maybe this sweater goes through 6, 8, 10 different hands, and it eventually gets to somebody that looks at it and thinks that's the most beautiful sweater they've ever seen in their life, and they'd like to wear it every single day, perhaps, right? So there's been many people that have practiced generosity here, and the Buddha is teaching you to practice accepting what is given. This is helping to enhance the quality of people's minds. But again, it's not black and white. It's not always do it this way and never do it that way. Because if someone offered you crystal methamphetamine or heroin or cocaine or something like that, are you going to accept what is given? Well, of course not, right? So you need to be able to look at each one of these situations and look at the variables closely and decide what will be wise in any given situation. Same thing with this next one, the awaiting what is given. What the Buddha is teaching you here is that you shouldn't put expectations on people to get you things. If you put expectations on people to get you things, now let's just say you have a life partner who goes to a business trip and you've loaded them up with all these expectations of what you want them to buy you. Well, now they're going around town looking for these products to buy you. And now when they come back, they didn't get everything that you wanted. And now you're angry or frustrated. So the Buddha is teaching you how to preserve and protect your mind, that if you just await what is given, it won't put strain in your relationship where this person feels obligated to get you things. And also it protects your mind that if somebody comes back and they don't have the things that you were wanting or expecting, you won't get upset or angry, right? So if you just await what is given and your life partner goes on a business trip and they choose to buy you something wonderful, and if they choose not to buy you something, then they don't buy you something, right? That's awaiting what is given. But there's situations where, like, I've had students come to me when I was in Chiang Mai and they said, hey, I'm going back to the USA. And is there anything that I can bring you when I come back? Right now they're practicing generosity with me. So you might have these kinds of situations, and you can navigate this through not looking at this as black and white. You need to look at all the variables and decide what would be wise in any given situation. And all these examples can help you. But let me know if you have any questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I will help you with any questions that you have. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. All right, so now we've got the third precept. This one, the Buddha says, abandoning unchastity, abandoning sexual relations with women, men who are protected by their mother, father, mother and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by teachings, who have a husband, wife, or partner, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. So here the Buddha is teaching you multiple things about your sexual conduct, that you could actually cause harm through your sexual activity, and now this harm is going to come back to you. So there's multiple things that he's teaching here. So this first one that I have is he's teaching you about not having sex with minors. You can see this here where he talks about abandoning sexual relations with people who are protected by their mother, father, mother and father, brother, sister, or relatives. Well, this is where in most places in the world, the human laws match up to the natural law of Kamma. That most places they have a certain age of consent, that it's unwise to have sex with someone who's a minor, because you're pulling this person away from their family who's learning and growing and developing. And this is very impactful to have sex. If you can remember the first time you had sex, if you can think back to that, if you've had sex before, you can understand that it was very impactful for you. And if you choose to have sex with someone, this is going to cause harm in your relationship. And this is going to cause harm in your day-to-day life, because now when you have sex with this minor, it's going to cause harm to this individual in this family. Well, there's most places in the world, they have laws that are like this, but there's some places in the world where it's not illegal to have sex with a minor. And if you look at those places that's the case, you'll see that their political system, their economic system, their educational system isn't really well developed. And those people are actually really struggling because they're having sex with people that are so young that people's minds don't get an opportunity to grow and develop into, more fully functioning adults to make wise decisions in their society. So that's why the Buddha is teaching that it's unwise to have sex with minors. And these natural laws affect us whether we're aware of them or not. So you can see examples of this in the world. And there's a big case in the USA right now where people have had sex with minors, and you can see all the difficulties that are coming about for the individuals who experience this and the people who actually chose to do this, right? So you would like to understand that aspect of what the Buddha is teaching. Where the Buddha talks about here, whose violation entails a penalty, this is having sex without consent. That if you were going to rape somebody, this is actually going to cause harm to that individual, and now harm can come back to you. This is why you can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can go to jail, you can get sexually transmitted diseases. There's all kinds of harms that can come from this type of thing. Where the Buddha talks about here abandoning unchastity, I'm not sure if you understand what chastity is, but I'll help you to understand what this means. In ancient times, that there were fathers that would put chastity belts on their daughters. What a chastity belt is metal underwear. And the father would have a lock and key. I can't imagine walking around with metal underwear, but there were women who were doing this back in ancient times. And it was the father that could unlock the underwear for when he agreed that his daughter could then have sex with their husband. So this would be chastity. This is like having sex with nobody whatsoever because you've got metal underwear on. Well, unchastity is just the opposite of that, where you're having sex with lots and lots and lots and lots of people. If that's the case, if you choose to do that, you're now going to experience certain harms where you can get sexually transmitted diseases. These people can find out about each other and they can start feeling very guilty. And now you start noticing that you can get beat up, you can get murdered, your material property can get damaged. This is the unwholesome results of our unwise decisions, not understanding this natural law. So what you would like to do is have one loyal, loving, consenting relationship. If you're going to have sex in that relationship, do that. And then when you're done with that relationship, and if you're going to move on to another one, finish that relationship and move on to another one. Whereas if you're having sex with multiple people, you're going to run into some of these challenges that I just described. Some cultures, they actually meet a certain partner and then they go to their family and they ask if they can move in and actually live in their home. If this is the case, then this is still practicing this precept because the family has accepted the relationship. And you're not doing what the Buddha is talking about here, which is abandoning sexual relation with people who are protected by their family. In this situation, the family has accepted the relationship and you might move in with those people. And that's something that some families and some people choose to do. Up here where the Buddha talks about who are protected by teachings, this is where if people have decided to remain celibate and they're not interested in having sex any longer based on their growth and development on the path to enlightenment, the Buddha teaches you that it would be unwise to have sex with those people because luring those people away from their celibacy is to cause harm. Because the very best thing that could ever happen for that person and the people around them is for them to get to enlightenment. And if you're luring them away from their celibacy, this is actually causing harm. So the Buddha teaches that it's unwise to actually do this. In places like Thailand and other places, they make this easy for you because they actually wear certain clothing to help you to know that they're ordained and that they're not having sex. So in Thailand, they'll wear orange robes and they'll shave their hair. There's other color robes too, but that's typically what they're doing in Thailand. Also, people who wear white clothes and shave their hair, they're also not choosing to have sex any longer either. I don't have sex any longer, and I also wear white clothes and shave my hair, but I don't wear white clothes because I'm advertising to people that I don't have sex. That's not something that I need to do, but just understand that in some places, that's what they're actually doing is they're making sure that people know that they're not having sex. So if you're interested in having sex, you would like to find somebody who is not having this vow of celibacy. Then here where people are having sex outside of already committed relationships, or they're having sex with somebody who's already in a relationship themselves. If you're in this situation, this is unchastity, and you would like to eliminate those kinds of things. Also, if there's someone who's being human trafficked, it's unwise to have sex with that person because they're being forced to have sex, typically for money. And now in those kinds of environments, you can get beat up, you can get robbed, you can get murdered, you can get sexually transmitted diseases. There's any number of unwholesome results that you can experience. Additionally, there are some people who are in paid sexual services who are willingly providing their sexual services. It's even unwise to have sex in these situations. This is also unchastity. This is where you can also get beat up, murdered, you can get robbed, you can get sexually transmitted diseases and things of this nature. Notice that here in this precept, the Buddha doesn't talk about same-gender relationships. He was aware of same-gender relationships because it's been going on ever since the beginning of humanity. But notice he doesn't talk about it as part of sexual misconduct because two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex, they're not actually causing harm to anyone. This is how wise the Buddha was, that 2,500 years ago, he already understood this. that ever since the beginning of humanity, we know that not everybody has had sex with the opposite gender. There's people today that are craving permanence and they're wanting everybody to have sex with the opposite gender. But because of the universal truth of impermanence, we can see that there's never been a time in human history where everybody had sex with the opposite gender, because that would be permanence. And we live in an impermanent world. So if you're choosing to have a relationship with someone of the same gender and you're having sex, you're not causing harm to anybody. If there's two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex, there's no harm that's being caused there. If somebody's getting angry or mad because that's what you're choosing to do, they're causing their own anger. They're causing their own frustration. It's not you that's causing that. It's their craving for permanence. So if you or somebody you know have same gender relationships, you're not causing any harm. Then we can understand transgender individuals through the teachings of the Buddha too. That if you understand that the body is one thing and the mind is something completely different, the idea that every mind is going to come into a body and identify with the same sexual organs as that is their gender, if everybody experienced that, that would be permanence. And that's not the world that we live in. We live in an impermanent world where some beings, their mind is going to come into the body and their mind is identifying as one gender and the body has sexual organs of a different gender. This is completely normal if you understand the universal truth of impermanence. But once again, there's people that have a craving for everybody to think of themselves as the same gender as the sexual organs of the body. But that's just not the way that the world's constructed. We can understand this through the universal truth of impermanence, and we can also understand it through the cycle of rebirth. If there's been a particular being in the past, let's just say they were female, 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 and now their mind is in a body that has male sexual organs as a human being, their mind can identify as a female because they've been female so many other times, right? So this makes complete sense to us if we understand the universal truth of impermanence and the cycle of rebirth. But there's people who don't understand these things and they have craving for permanence. And when they don't get what they want, they get angry. And this is coming from that ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. So you can understand same gender relationships and transgender individuals that if you have same gender relationships or if you're transgender, you're not causing any harm to anybody at all. And if people are getting angry at that, that's their anger that's being caused by their own mind. Sometimes students ask me about masturbation and whether or not this is wise or unwise or whether they should do this or not do this. So I will help you to understand this as it relates to the teachings of the Buddha as well. It's not always wise and it's not always unwise because it's not black and white. So masturbation can be used in a helpful way, but it can also be used harmfully as well. What determines this is whether you're decreasing your sensual desire or whether you're increasing your sensual desire. So say, for example, somebody is listening to me talk right now and they realize like, oh my goodness, I have 5 boyfriends or 5 girlfriends. And now they are interested in bringing that down to one person because they realize that that's wise. Well, maybe when they start doing that and they come down to one person, one partner, maybe they have a really high sex drive and they decide to use some masturbation during this period of time in order to allow their mind to adjust to having just one partner. Well, this was really helpful for them, that they decreased their sensual desire and they're now having just one partner. Or say there's somebody who has such a strong sexual craving that they want to go out into the world and want to rape somebody, but instead they use masturbation. And now when they masturbate, they don't have that sexual craving to go rape somebody. Well, this was really helpful for them, right? This didn't cause any harm to others. So masturbation can be used in a helpful way where it's not causing harm. It's decreasing one's sensual desire. But it can also be used in a harmful way. Let's just say somebody was masturbating excessively, 10, 15, 20, 25 times a day. This could be increasing their sensual desire. So you need to be able to look at whether you're using it to increase or decrease your sensual desire, because this can actually release the pressure out of your mind. If you have a multi-million-dollar structure like a dam, and it's building water up on the dam and it's putting pressure on the dam, one of the things that they do to protect the dam is they open up the dam and release the water. And this actually protects the structure. And when the water drops down, they will shut the dam again. So you can do the same thing with masturbation. Is if you feel sexual craving building up in your mind, maybe you've gone 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks without sex, and you're trying to get farther and farther away from sex, but you just feel so much pressure in your mind, you might use a bit of masturbation to release that pressure, right? So this is how you could potentially use this in a beneficial way or maybe a harmful way. And again, it's your decision to make of how you actually use it. Sex with animals is one of the few things that is black and white, that an animal can't actually give us consent to have sex with it. And I suggest that if somebody did do this, they'd probably get injured. They'd probably have sexually transmitted diseases and all kinds of issues with this kind of situation. Pornography is something that sometimes people go towards because they're craving intimacy and they don't have an actual partner, and they might actually turn towards pornography as a way to stimulate their mind and actually have some type of intimacy. And there might even be some masturbation associated with that as well. What you'll find is the deeper and deeper you go into this, it's almost like a fantasy world, and it's very difficult to come out of it. And when you come out of it, it's even challenging for you because the real life experiences that you're having with sexual relationships never quite live up to this fantasy world that you had your mind in when you were watching pornography. So if you're interested in intimacy, I would recommend you go towards a human in order to have a relationship. And if you're currently using pornography, you would be wise to move away from that because it's going to help improve the condition of your mind where you won't have that craving and that desire in the mind. And you'll notice more clarity and focus and concentration and other beneficial results where you're not experiencing discontentedness related to pornography. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this third precept. Okay, I don't see any questions here. So I'm going to move to the fourth one, which is really straightforward and easy for you guys to understand, that the Buddha teaches abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a truth speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. So this is exactly what you're seeing here, is that the Buddha is teaching you to eliminate lying and false speech. This includes like spreading conspiracy theories and unfounded truths and things that you don't know to be true, right? Because he's giving you illuminating language here because it's important for you to be a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world, because this is going to help improve your relationships, both personally and professionally. Whereas if you go out into the world and you're lying, people are going to discover those lies and it's going to damage your relationships. It'll hinder you from career growth and development in your profession. The Buddha understood this precept so well that I included this other teaching here for you to see how closely he actually practiced this. Here he's teaching his son Rahula, where he's explaining to his son that he doesn't even tell a joke that has a lie in it. Now, sometimes people think that the Buddha abandoned his family and he never came back. This is untrue. The Buddha taught his family and his son, his wife, his stepmother, all these people were getting to enlightenment during his lifetime. So he's teaching his son here that it's unwise to tell a lie even as a joke. Now, you might not see a Buddha as someone who tells a joke because oftentimes what you see is you see these very serious, solemn pictures of the Buddha or these statues where the Buddha is always meditating. Right? Well, that's not what an enlightened being does. An enlightened being does meditate, but they actually have lots and lots and lots of fun. The Buddha is going to have a personality. An enlightened being is going to have a personality where they tell jokes, but they tell truthful jokes because they understand that it's unwise to tell lies. If you can imagine this individual being in a class like this, where the Buddha was teaching and telling all these truths, but if he was on the side lying, people wouldn't know whether or not his teachings are true or false. But if you get into the practice of always telling the truth, and you're doing that for multiple years, people get to the habit to know, like, oh my gosh, whenever this person speaks, it's the truth, right? So you're not interested in telling jokes that are a lie. You're also not interested in telling diminishing and degrading jokes that are degrading other people. You would like to tell uplifting jokes. And these jokes are oftentimes more challenging to create, but people will oftentimes laugh at these because they're more funny. It took you more time to develop these types of jokes. So this is the fourth precept where you're eliminating lying even as a joke. And you're going to need to practice this more and more closely, ensuring that you're not telling deliberate lies, but you're also not spreading unfounded truths like, conspiracy theories and stuff like that. So let me know if you guys have questions here on this one. Okay, I don't see any questions. So now we'll go to the last one, which is the fifth precept. Here the Buddha is teaching you to refrain from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. Now again, whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, if you encounter words that you don't understand, or you're not sure if your understanding matches to what maybe is being used by the Buddha, you would be wise to look these words up. So when I saw this precept, I kind of knew what heedlessness meant, but I wasn't sure 100%. So I went and investigated it. And that's what I suggest that you do in these situations too. So if you go out and investigate this word heedlessness, what it means is careless, thoughtless, inattentive, uncalm, unaware, or unmindful. This is actually going to help you to eliminate this unmindfulness. Because if you're putting substances into the body that's producing heedlessness, you're walking in the opposite direction of enlightenment, because you need to cultivate awareness of mind and mindfulness, where you're practicing that all day long in order to be able to purify the mind. So if you're putting substances into the body that's producing heedlessness, this is actually going to cause difficulties for you in making wise decisions. In fact, if you go visit people who are in prison or in jail, they might tell you that they're there for murder, or they're there for robbing a bank or something like that. But if you really peer into it and you really ask them, like, why are you actually here? They'll tell you that it's substances, about 80% of them, because they would have never killed that person if they weren't high on drugs, or they would have never robbed that bank if they didn't have a drug habit to be able to feed. So if you don't practice this precept, you're more likely to not practice all the others: killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and lying. So you would like to be sure that you're not putting any substances into the body that is causing heedlessness. But just like all these other precepts, it's not black and white here. You need to be able to look at each substance and decide for yourself. So I've got a collection of a few substances here that we can talk about and help you to be able to see how to do this. So for example, like marijuana, this is a particular substance that can be used for a high, but it can also be used for medical benefits as well. And you need to look at it and determine how are you using it, because there's evidence that shows that if you put some CBD oil, which is oil from this plant, on the tongue of a child, there's these children who have like seizures 20 times a day. And if you put oil on their tongue, they won't have another seizure for about 6 months, right? So we have irrefutable evidence that this plant has medical properties, right? But it can also be used for a high as well. And you're the only one that's going to know how you're using it and why you're using it. If someone's using it for a high, they will usually look for a high THC. This is one part of the plant. There's the THC, and they will look for a high content of THC. If they're looking for medical properties, they will usually look for a high CBD. That's the other part of the plant that has the medical properties. And someone who's looking for a high, they'll typically smoke it, but they can ingest it in other ways too, like an edible and things like that for a high. Where people who are looking for medical benefits, they're usually going to use an oil or an edible or something like this. So if you're taking marijuana for stress or anxiety or things like that, that's not an actual medical reason to use marijuana, because there's no amount of marijuana that's going to eliminate your stress and your anxiety, because it's your craving, desire, attachment that's causing this. So you would like to be sure that if you're going to use marijuana, that you have a real valid medical purpose for it, because if you're using it for a high, then you're walking in the wrong direction of enlightenment. Things like cigarettes, it's very clear cut that these don't have any medical properties, and that's why more and more people have figured this out, and it was causing a lot of harm, and people were getting lung cancer, mouth cancer, tongue cancers, things like this. So there's less and less people in the world that are smoking cigarettes. If you're currently smoking cigarettes, it would be wise for you to move away from those, and this will help you to experience better results and through making wiser decisions to not take substances that cause heedlessness. You're going to need to pay attention to things like prescription medications, because some prescription medications can be addictive and can actually cause heedlessness. So nowadays we live in the information age, whereas if you're getting a prescription by a doctor and you're in their office, you could probably use your mobile device to research that prescription while you're sitting right there in their office to be able to determine if it's addictive or not. And now when you research that substance, if what you come back with is that it's addictive, you could talk to the doctor and ask for another substance. And maybe they could actually prescribe a different medication. And this would be very helpful for you if you make that decision. But in some situations, you might get the answer back that there is no other substance, that this is the only one. And if that's the situation, this is really helpful for you, because now you know the substance that you're about to start taking is addictive and you would like to use it for a limited period of time and get off of it as soon as possible. So this insight and this wisdom is going to help you to be able to make wiser decisions about what you're putting in the body and how you make decisions regarding those prescription medications. You're going to need to also pay attention to your caffeine intake. Caffeine is a stimulant. It puts the mind in an overactive state. And oftentimes people are using this because they want energy. Well, if you choose to use caffeine, it's going to hinder you from being able to experience some of the qualities of enlightenment. Because an enlightened being will have energy all day long. They will have sustainable energy. They don't get exhausted or tired. They get sleepy, but they don't get exhausted or tired. Whereas if you're using caffeine, it's going to lift your mind up into this energetic state, but then it's going to drop back off. And it never allows the mind to build the natural state of energy to have this vitality and this vigor all throughout your day. So if you eliminate caffeine, you're going to see improved results in your condition of your mind and your life. You're going to need to also pay attention to sugar intake. We pretty much learn as a child that taking excessive amount of sugar produces a high. So you're going to need to pay attention to that and make sure that you're not taking excessive amounts of sugar. Some people will tell you that psychedelic substances are going to help you get to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. That these psychedelic substances, they do promote this introspection where you're having this kind of inward looking ability, but it's only when you're using this substance that you're actually able to experience that. In order to be able to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to be introspective and reflective at all times during your day. And if you're relying on psychedelic substances, you never give your mind the ability to cultivate those qualities naturally. You would like to be able to cultivate that so that you can practice this introspection and reflection at all times during your day. Because if you're in a business meeting with your boss and they're talking about a very challenging subject and you need to be introspective and reflective to be able to provide some answers and solutions here, you can't ask your boss to hold on. You can't be like, hey, boss, hold on a second. I know you're wanting me to make some important decisions here. I need to go drop a hit of LSD and take some magic mushrooms, and I'll be back. And when I come back, I will answer the question for you, right? You can't do this kind of thing. You're going to need to be introspective and reflective at all times during your day. And if you rely on psychedelic substances, it's not going to allow you to be able to do that. So these are just a few substances that I'm using to be able to help you to understand this precept. This word heedlessness that the Buddha used, it's timeless. It applied during his lifetime, now, and long into the future. Because he could have never imagined all the substances that we would have invented, like LSD and PCP. These are all chemical-based substances, and he could have never imagined those. So he didn't give an exhaustive list. He just used this word heedlessness so you can apply it now and for all time in the future. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular precept. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So I'm just going to end class by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to learn and understand the teachings of the Buddha. Next week, I'm going to be sharing chapter 8, which is titled Transforming the Three Poisons, Craving, Anger, and Ignorance. This is where you're going to broaden and deepen your understanding of what's going on in the unenlightened mind. And you'll see how the 5 precepts are actually helping you to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance out of the mind by practicing these closely, because that's what's going to produce the enlightened mental state. So I'm going to explain to you what the symptoms of these 3 poisons are so you can verify that you have these in your mind. And then I'm going to give you the solutions of how to eliminate them and eradicate them out of the mind. So that's what we'll be doing next week. So thank you all for joining, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee krap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.